Today, I wanted to talk about something a little bit different. Bale grazing. I'm sure you've heard about it. If you haven't, you can look it up. There's a lot of stuff on the internet about bale grazing. This is John Scarborough, everybody. You're going to have to excuse the noise. It's a little unit we got pumping gas right now up there for that well. This is a little spot right here we did some bale grazing in. I'm not big on bale grazing, and I'm going to go into a couple of the positives and negatives of bale grazing and where I think it's useful and where I think you need to be aware of it. Okay, so right off the bat, let's just go ahead and look at this spot right here. This right here is a bale that is left over from last year about this time. And as you can see, it's still here, and obviously there was no grass or anything that grew up through it. Okay, so that's one of the negatives that I wanted to talk about, was leaving such a thick, dense amount of grass here that you're not allowing the soil to be, you're not allowing the sun to do its job, which is photosynthesis. Okay, to get to allow the energy from the sun to grow plants. Okay, because you're covering it up. Okay, now the good side obviously is that the ground is covered and it's not exposed. So what you have to do is decide where you're going to put it. If you put it somewhere that there's already really good grass and really good perennial grasses with good root structure, you put it there, there's a chance you could kill those root structures out and then not allow them to come back strong next summer. Okay, so that's obviously a place you're not going to want to bale graze. Okay, this spot right here, however, was a place that had nothing but pine needles and a few berry vines, and that was it. Mostly it was just bare soil, or it was all of these pine needles from all these pines right in here. So what I did was I decided to bale graze this little area. I couldn't get back in here real easy, so I just came in here and dropped the bale off the back of my truck. Started back there and worked my way up here. Ended up with about 5 bales along this area. So obviously this spot is a good example for that. You can tell there's a lot of grasses that are now starting to grow. Here, like I said, there were no grasses before. So that was one of the benefits, is it really worked the soil over and tore the root structure out of the berry vines. You can tell some of the grasses even started to take over the berry vines. Now it's not complete. It's not like a permanent fix, or at least not a fix for this year. But this is a whole lot better than it was before. Plus, it actually worked the seed bank over enough that we started getting some good perennial grasses in here. Some Indian grasses and a couple other different types of perennial grasses that we had come up in here that we never seeded. So that's a good thing too. So that's one of the things you want to make sure you think about, where you're putting your bale if you are going to bale graze. Obviously, one of the main things that you hear people talk about when they talk about bale grazing, the main benefit is this. You can sit your bales out there, a whole bunch of them, and then you can just put a hot wire up and move it back as you want them to graze on the bale. Okay, so that's one of the benefits. Mostly it's for ease. I'm not a firm believer in doing things just for ease when it comes to farming. If you're killing off your grass, I don't think that's a good idea. For a spot like this, it worked out well, and that's exactly what we did. We used it for reserve, for when we needed some extra hay, more than we had rolled out for that day, or when it was going to get really cold or something like that, then we would just take it loose. Or when we got really busy, we could take one of the wires loose and we could let them have some hay. But we were very careful about where we put it. And that's the main thing I want to drive home here, is being very careful about where you put it. So when you do find a good spot like this to put it, this right here is actually a good thing, because this slowly breaks down. This was all red clay in here, and this slowly starts to break down and slowly introduce carbon back into the soil. And you can tell, if you look at that soil, you can see a little bit of remnant of red, but there's a lot of black that has come back into that soil. And I even dig farther down into it and it doesn't even, it almost doesn't even look like clay anymore. And I'm telling you, I mean, you can see a little bit here and there, but I'm telling you, this used to be a whole lot more clay right in here. So over time, this has broke down, this bale has broke down in here and allowed the earthworms to go to work and slowly bringing in carbon into the area. So I might not would do this again, or I would do it maybe 1 or 2 more times. I wouldn't continually do it. If I now let it rest through the winter and then recover through next summer and see how it's going to be, what I would predict is that this spot is going to look a lot better next summer. I'm going to show you an example over here, if you'll bear with the shaking, an example of a well, let's just say a poor example of bale grazing, a way that I wouldn't suggest doing it. And it was me, I'll admit it. I'm the bad guy here. I messed up. I was trying to roll the bale off, and it rolled off the wrong way, fell right down where I didn't want it to, and did not roll out like I had hoped, which happens. I mean, you mess up, you forgive yourself, and you let it go. But this is the kind of thing that you don't want to do intentionally. This is not something with bale grazing that I would suggest allowing to happen intentionally. Like, look at that. They just totally turned that into a mud pit. It just looks awful. Plus, half your hay is wasted. What I had wanted to do was roll it down there and roll it across right there. Well, it was pouring rain. It was one of those bales that was flat on one spot. We rolled it off the truck, and then it flipped over sideways. When you don't have tractors, you can't always do exactly everything the way you want it. The sad thing is this is how a lot of people feed their hay 90% of the time. I mean, they consider this the way to feed hay. If you're one of those people, I'm sorry, don't mean to hurt your feelings. I don't agree with that, because any good root structure that was there, they tear that root structure up, and you just destroy it. Plus, you're not spreading your nutrient and seeds out. I would much rather spread it out. I could have had the whole strip there could have been covered in seed and nutrients. Plus, they probably would have gotten a little bit more out of it, and they wouldn't have been standing in mud when it was done. So I don't like that. If you're going to bale graze, try to be careful about just putting it in one spot and letting them totally destroy and muck up your ground, especially right here on this drive. I mean, that was just an awful spot to do that. So that's my bad. What I will say is, in the right strategic area, even something like that can be useful. If you were to take something like that and put it in a very weedy, like thick, dense, woody area, like let's just say this over here. If you were to put it in something like that and use it every now and then, you wouldn't want to keep your cows grazing in that all year round. I mean, all winter. You know, you wouldn't want to do that, I don't think. You're just asking for trouble. But if you were to use it in 1 or 2 places here and there, strategically put it in there and let them really tear out the root structure of stuff that you don't want, and then add in grass, I think that could be a useful place. You know, that's something you could do, a useful tool, a way to use your animals to work for you. Like I said, it's not something I would suggest very often. I do think it's useful. I have used it. But just be careful where you do put it, because if you put it somewhere where there's good perennial grass roots already, well, now you've just killed off half those roots. I can almost guarantee you right there is going to be nothing but a weed patch next year. So anyway, guys, I wanted to throw this video out here about some of the positives and negatives of bale grazing. I do think it's a useful tool, but I think it needs to be considered a useful tool. For the most part, I think rolling your bales out is one of the best things you can do. Thanks, everybody. This is John Scarborough. Don't forget to subscribe and like my videos. Share this content if you like it, and hit the bell icon, because my videos are kind of sporadic.